I did it. Good evening, everybody. Today is December the 1st, 2020. My goodness, this year has gone by incredibly fast, and it's hard to believe that we've had to endure so much. But I suppose the blessing is that this year is almost over. I'm a big fan of John Oliver. He's a comedian on, I think, HBO, and he literally blew up the year 2020. Signifying that it was time for this year to come to an end. But having said that, we as a board and as a district have endured a great deal, and it looks like we feel very confident that we'll come onto 2021 as a more stronger, more viable, more determined district. And we do that. We can say that because a number of things that, for example, we'll talk about today will put us in that position. So again, as we sort of reflect on one of our last meetings, Madam Clerk, how many more do we have for 2020? How many meetings left, do you know?
We have, well, including next week, Tuesday, we have then next week, Tuesday is our Audit Committee meeting, and then we have our Finance Committee meeting on the 15th, and then we have our business meeting on the 17th, and that will be our last meeting of the year.
Well, a few meetings left, but in the course of what's left of this very difficult year, for example, today we'll be talking about basically what's going to lead us into the next decade, or at least half a decade. For example, we'll be discussing the independent monitors plan, which you all, if you've been following the Board of Education and the city school district, there's been a number of hearings. I think one was last night that a number of my colleagues and I attended. So there is 2021 is looking to be a brighter future for the district and for the city. And I know we're not going to get into it today, but one of the things that my colleagues and I listened to last night, and we went before the community to show our support for some of the elements of the independent monitors plan is, and it came up today in a meeting we had. There are 3 scenarios that are described in terms of what our financial outlook might be in the foreseeable future. And that suggests that 2021 will begin a year where the Board of Education, Superintendent of Schools, the independent monitor, and a whole lot of other hardworking folks are going to be looking forward. We're not going to be looking into the rearview mirror. And so like John Oliver and others, I look forward, and you, I suppose, I look forward to this year coming to a close. And I look forward to my colleagues and I, including the superintendent and the independent monitor and the thousands of district employees. We look forward to building on some of the successes we had this year and put the COVID in our rearview mirror. All right, having said that, let's get on with the business of today's meeting. It is a special meeting, and as always, we begin our meeting with speakers. Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers for this evening?
We do. We have 5 speakers signed up to speak. Currently 4 are in their waiting room, and so we will take them momentarily. Our first speaker is Kimberly Brown, but she is not with us tonight, and so I will welcome Ms. Megan Reddington. Ms. Reddington is a parent and will be speaking about the charter schools. Ms. Reddington, are you there?
Hi, yes, good evening, I am.
Good evening. You have 3 minutes.
Great, thank you so much. I wanted to just take a moment now. I know we're in the middle of what seems to be another difficult situation with the reopening of our schools. I know a lot of parents right now have a lot of questions and they're feeling really frustrated about the questions we have in terms of what it will look like when we return, hopefully this school year. I want to just take a moment to focus on 5 other things that I wanted to address the board about, even though at the top of my mind is this difficult time with reopening, because I know that our students are watching districts around us go back to school and have a little bit more of an opportunity to have what is normal school for them. But I'm here really tonight because I can't stress enough the importance of a moratorium on charter schools. We continue to talk about the declining enrollment of the Rochester City School District, and we're not hearing enough about a moratorium on charter schools. Charter schools are the competition, as people like to talk about it. And I've heard people in central office, I've heard school chiefs, I've heard people in the community say competition is good for the RCSD, and I disagree with this. When we have competition, it means there's winners and losers. And our board commissioners and our superintendent and our local politicians need to understand that we can't have losers in the RCSD, because that's what's happening. We need to have a moratorium on charter schools. We can't continue to open up these schools and create this chaotic enrollment in our district. And as we watch our students suffer because of these charter schools that continue to open, we really need the board leadership to help at the state level. We need our politicians. We need everybody on board to stop the growth of charter schools in our district. And I know that a lot of our parents were shocked and deeply discouraged when President White appointed a board trustee from our competition to the board. But I'm going to say, he's here. Welcome, Commissioner Clark. And I'm going to ask you to please be a part of the solution here. And maybe you can help us find a way to keep our RCSD students in the RCSD and not continue to have our resources drained. They are playing by different rules. They are not public schools. They are private entities. And our commissioners really need to stand up to this if we are going to succeed in our future, because our students continue to lose out. I also want to emphasize an end to the school choice, the managed school choice policy. I want there to be community energy for new commissioners. We need to get people with skill and will. President White, I know you don't want to look in the rearview mirror, but parents are. What happened? How did we get here? And our commissioners who have been on board, it's time for you to move on. We need new leadership in our
Ms.
commission.
Reddington, I do apologize, but your 3 minutes are over for tonight.
Thank you very much. And I
Thank you
look
for joining
forward,
us.
President White, to a better 2021.
Thank you, Ms. Reddington. We appreciate you joining us. Our next speaker is Leanne Dupree, a staff member, talking about layoffs and charter school collaboration. Ms. Dupree, are you with us?
I am.
Wonderful. When you're ready, can you turn on your camera?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you have 3 minutes.
All right, thank you so much. It is ironic to me that I presented a similar speech nearly a year ago, and much remains applicable today. I struggled how to understand how this board and Superintendent Myers-Small could listen to heartfelt pleas and still make cuts and displace staff. I recall the severed relationship and trust between families and our district. This is clearly a business decision. In corporate America, layoffs and cuts when profits are not generated are anticipated and expected. My current fear is in numbness spreading across our schools, community, and families. These assaults continue, but it has become so routine that people forget how it feels when they are hurt so badly. I want to make it clear. Schools should be run for the outcome, not the income. Our value as an education system is in recognizing the inherent value in each student as they are, not in the profits they generate. Our schools are segregated. We do not have equitable funding from the state due to the historic and systematic lack of value in Rochester's children. Reflect on decisions to approve layoffs and charters. Does this align with right-sizing the district or aid in racial segregation and profiteering off our children? I currently see this board and superintendent as privateers, downgrading services and resources provided due to the bottom line. Most businesses fail. We don't have that luxury in the Rochester City School District. Our students need us now. These decisions have not been democratic. You have not been bound yourselves to your shareholders, their families, constituents, community you serve, and educational professionals, including teachers. Apparently, this investment currently resides for charter schools. I implore you again to consider, how much are you really trying to save our district? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Dupree. We appreciate you joining us tonight. Okay, our next speaker that is with us is Claire LaBrosa, a staff member speaking about staff enrollment and charter schools. Ms. LaBrosa, you have 3 minutes. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Claire LaBrosa. I'm a graduate of the RCSD. I'm a teacher in the district. I'm a resident of the city of Rochester and a parent to 3 children, ages 2, 7, and 9. And Commissioner White, if you like John Oliver, you should watch the episode on charter schools. I'm going to email you the link. In Rochester, we currently have 21 charter schools in operation. Last year, $91 million came out of the RCSD budget and went to those charter schools. Our deficit was $85 million. It is clear that creating a charter system, which is allowed to grow exponentially without local oversight and local accountability, has hurt the vast majority of the students who reside in the city of Rochester, 80% of whom attend an RCSD school. In the last 12 months, over 800 positions have been cut. 4 schools and 3 programs were closed, one that served refugees in grades kindergarten through 6, and one that served young mothers who were getting support so they could finish high school. As an educator and a parent, I know that closing a child's school is harmful. These children get one chance at an education, and recovering from interrupted school experiences is difficult. These are not low-performing shoe stores you are closing. These are a child's home away from home and should be a place of stability. Educating children is not comparable to running a business. Children are an investment in our future, and we will not see the returns for many years to come. Our decisions should be based on their well-being and their needs. The board commissioners have been elected to be good stewards of the Rochester City School District. Your job is not to help sabotage the success of the district and the students we serve by supporting a system that leads to instability. I call on the board to make a pledge to speak out against charter school expansion, call for a statewide moratorium on new charter schools, and to ensure greater accountability and oversight of every existing charter school on the local level. There will never be financial stability in the RCSD without an end to charter schools and their expansion. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Ms. LaBrosa. We do appreciate you joining us today. Okay, our final speaker at this time is Ms. Kristen French. She joins us as a staff member speaking about the state monitor reports. Ms. French, are you with us?
I am. Yes, I am.
Wonderful. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Sorry. All right. As I was reviewing some of Dr. Jallo's observations and recommendations, I kept wondering, how did we get here? I know the answer has to do with hundreds of years of systematic racism, so all I was able to focus on this evening was the past few years. Why does it feel like our district is being intentionally targeted by our city and state to be destroyed segment by segment? So here's what I came up with. In June of 2019, Mayor Warren attempted to put a referendum to have a state takeover and replace the district's elected board with appointed board. T. Andrew Brown, who was previously appointed by Mayor Warren as the Corporation Counsel for the City of Rochester and now the Region's Vice Chancellor, also supported a state takeover. In addition, Mayor Warren is a strong supporter of charter schools, and there are a few of our board commissioners. Warren released a plan to create a whole new district with failing schools and has expressed interest in mayoral control. And in October 2019, the gentleman withholding about $200 million from the RCSD, Governor Cuomo, expressed his support for a state takeover as well. In July 2019, Terry Dade was hired after Barbara Dean Williams abruptly retired in January of that year, and before the enormous financial deficit was exposed. In January 2020, directly following the December 2019 mass RCSD layoffs and the school closings, Dr. Myers-Small was an associate commissioner in the state education department, which involved direct oversight of more than a dozen RCSD schools. Before his departure, Terry Dade helped permanently close programs and schools in our district and lay off and displace hundreds of staff. Then in April of 2020, the community spontaneously found out that Terry Dade was hired by an outside district and the U of R, who oversees East High School, as part of a state-approved partnership, assisted in the recruiting process. 2 weeks later, Dr. Myers-Smalls leaves the state education department after 5 months and becomes our new superintendent. Then days later, Dr. Jallo, who has successfully opened and managed charter schools in Philadelphia and Washington, D.C., is appointed by the state to be our fiscal monitor for $154.27 per hour. 3 months later, Superintendent Myers-Small appoints a former charter school chief academic officer, Dr. Kathleen Black, as our RCSD chief academic officer. And then very recently, Commissioner Van White insisted on having a charter school trustee to fill the vacant board seat, and his insistence paid off for him. There's so much of this timeline I left off, and yet there seems to be a clear path to how we've been doing this over the past few years. There's a strong desire by some state, city, and school appointed and elected leaders to relinquish democratic control and hand it over to the state or the mayor, and a constant push for the privatization of public education. This is not all of our district and state leaders' goal, but the pattern shows it may be some. And hence the harsh and harmful recommendations put forth by Dr. Jallo to this board to allow the destruction and dismantling of our district to continue. Thank you.
Ms. French, we appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. President, that does conclude our speakers portion of the meeting.
We appreciate the participation of all of our parents, Ms. Reddington, Ms. LaBrocha, and Ms. French. In fact, your comments and the opportunity to speak reflect, at the very least, our agreement that democracy is important and democracy is fueled by people speaking their minds. And perhaps there being differences of opinion. So we welcome you, and a number of you have spoke repeatedly in the past, and I know my colleagues and I would encourage you to do that. Because by doing that, the democracy becomes better. So, and it's important as educators that we practice what we preach. So again, thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedules to come and talk to us tonight. I also wanted to note, parents participate in a whole bunch of different ways here in this district. We are joined by Joe Fiore. Joe, I'm not always sure I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, and I apologize if I'm not. Joe is our parent rep. And he serves as a rep to our parent rep to our policy committee. And so I want to tell folks on behalf of the Board of Education, there's a whole bunch of different ways you can participate. Yes, you can sign up and speak your mind at board meetings. And as I said, the Board of Education welcomes that, but there's other ways that you can participate as well. You can be a rep to any of our committees. Madam Clerk, are we short of parent reps on any of our committees? And if so, which ones are they?
Well, we are still without a parent rep for our audit committee, and we are also, I believe, still recruiting for a second parent rep for the finance committee at this time.
So how would a person, if they were interested, watching tonight, how would they sign up to see if they could serve in that capacity?
Certainly. So on the website, if you go to the Board of Education tab on rcsdk12.org, then you will be able to see a tab there that says become a parent rep to a board committee. The application is there on the site, as well as instructions on how to submit that application and information on all of the different committees. So you can read up and see which ones you're interested in.
So that is another example in which how the Board of Education in the Rochester City School District keeps its door open to citizens. Again, direct participation by being involved in committees, or just signing up to speak at by 12 o'clock of the day of the business meeting to express your opinion, and also you can provide a written submission as well. But again, I want to thank Joe for coming out tonight and participating in tonight's meeting. Joe is, I don't know if he's been introduced to Commissioner Clark. Have you had a chance to meet Joe yet?
No, I haven't, but I did write down his, and I will send him an email because I would love to sit down and meet with him.
Joe, as I indicated, is the parent rep on our policy committee, and Commissioner Clark is recently appointed chair of our policy committee. So he and Joe are are going to become close working partners in the foreseeable future. All right, next item on our agenda is special, yes.
Sorry, Dan.
That's all right.
On the representatives, I want to.
Yes, thanks, Willa. You did want to mention that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what you think I'm going to say, but on the audit committee, the law is clear that it's open to the entire community, not just to a parent rep. So if there is anyone listening who does not have a student in RCSD right now, but does have some expertise in the area of audit, their applications are welcome. And that's specified by the Hevesy law that created the audit committee.
Willa, that triggered in my mind, though, that you sent me an email, and actually I was at the dentist when I got your text, actually. You wanted to have a follow-up discussion on student reps on committees. You want to have that discussion? We might as well do it now. Go ahead.
Okay. You and I had a conversation about ensuring that a student was present on at our policy committee meetings as well. And we weren't sure at the time of that private one-on-one conversation whether the student representative that serves on our monthly board meetings would be able to participate in every single committee meeting as well. But we talked about inserting language like the student rep or his designee into our bylaws. Well, since then, I've read the bylaws once again in regard to the student rep, and the language there, I'm pulling it up right now, I beg your pardon. The language on the student representative refers to what amounts to the SLC charter. It says, except for the annual organizational meeting, the student representative designated under the Student Advisory Board Rules and Regulations of 1997, as amended from time to time, may attend and participate. So our bylaws delegate the decision as to who the representative to the board is to the Student Advisory Board or SLC bylaws, I think. I have no idea what the bylaws actually read, and message to Anthony Jordan asking if he knew where that document was and how it reads, and to see if their bylaws currently allow the student body to make multiple appointments rather than just a single student representative to the Board of Education. So perhaps this conversation isn't ripe because we don't know everything we need to know to actually make a recommendation. But I did want to put it before the board that there'd been some conversations about working harder at getting a student representative on our committees and for it to be more, potentially be more than a single student identified. And I just don't know what the bylaws say, and I'm not sure anybody could lay their hands on the student advisory board charter anymore. Just like I'm not sure that who has an original copy of the Parent Advisory Council's charter. So that's where we're at right now.
Can I make a suggestion to Commissioner Malloy? This is clearly intergovernmental relations stuff that perhaps if you had the opportunity, you might be able to get this on your agenda with staff doing a little bit of advance work, like speaking to counsel, general counsel's office, finding out what the the law or the rules are around this. I think this is a good idea. We just have to make sure that we're doing it consistent with our bylaws. So I'm wondering, Commissioner Malloy, if Commissioner Powell, this makes sense to you, if she was able to get this on her agenda and sort of flesh this thing out so that we can figure out how to make it happen. And the only suggestion I would give Commissioner Malloy is that you contact or have staff contact our student representative and make sure they're involved in the whole fleshing out of this whole process, because that would truly be ironic if we left them out of the loop on this decision-making process.
It would be my pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. Commissioner Powell, does that make sense to you, that approach?
Sure. Anything that advances the ball off of the center line. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Let's just go on to our next item on our agenda by me indicating this and repeating some stuff here. There are many opportunities for parents to be involved. We know, most of us know what a difficult and challenging job it is to be a parent in and of itself, particularly during COVID. But the Board of Education realizes that there are parents that might have the time and opportunity to participate in the governing of the school district. And there are a number of different ways that the board is encouraging you to do that. You can be a parent rep. The clerk has indicated the way in which you could sign up for those vacancies. You can speak to the board, as we saw a number of our citizens and parents do this evening. You can provide written submissions to the Board of Education. And let me just conclude this last opportunity that is often forgotten. You can contact any one of us on the members of the Board of Education. A number of people have expressed concern about my appointment of a person who was connected, is the operative phrase, was connected with a charter school. If you have concerns about him, that would be Commissioner Clark. Call him up, talk to him. I would encourage you to do that. Or call up any one of us. Our emails and our phone numbers are on the website. Please contact us. You don't just have to express your concerns on this forum. You can and you should. But if you have ongoing concerns that just don't get addressed because you can't really talk to us, call us up. I'm sure, Commissioner Clark, you don't have any problem with anybody calling you up and asking you about your views about charter schools or anything like that, right?
No, please call me.
Yep. All of us are available. Every one of us is available. So use any one of those opportunities, but also don't forget, the best way to move the ball forward, I'm sorry, Commissioner Powell, for stealing your phrase, is to have a team player with you. Talk to us, call us up. All right, let's move on. And here's the thing, we listen, because the next item on our agenda is a discussion of the legislative agenda. And as Commissioner Adams goes through that with you, if you all pay close attention, he's gonna talk about, or maybe he'll have time to reference, the fact that one of our priorities is a moratorium on charter schools. Commissioner Adams?
Good evening. After several meetings with the CIGR committee and feedback from fellow commissioners, from the administration, from SLC, as well as a review of the NSBA and the MCSBA priorities, I'm seeking further discussion as we finalize these priorities and move to adopt at our December 17th business meeting. I have referenced where our priorities align with NSBA's recently adopted priorities. I am proposing the following legislative priorities for 2021. 1, under the financial stability and equity priorities. 1, we're going to oppose mid-year state aid funding cuts. NSBA adopted legislative resolution 18. 2, full funding of foundation aid. 3, restructuring the MOE with the city of Rochester. We're seeking an immediate increase, legislation mandating annual increases, increased fiscal independence over the money provided from the city, as referenced in the state monitor's fiscal report and work session discussion. 4, a moratorium on charter schools. NSBA adopted legislative resolution number 8. 5, support increased funding for infrastructure to provide educational equity by minimizing the digital divide and increase broadband access. A bill entitled Emergency Educational Connections Act of 2020 was introduced to the Senate. There is support for a number of senators, including Senator Schumer and Gillibrand. The non-financial priorities are: 1, increase support to implement restorative practices into the current school climate and culture framework and mental health supports. Mention the acts. The acts is for restorative practice to be mandated as this discipline model for our schools. We understand we're going to keep that on the table. It's not going to be the #1 priority right now, but we're definitely going to keep that on the table. We got some stuff going on. 2, increase support to address teachers shortages in high needs areas, i.e. ELA and math. 3, increase access to a highly qualified, diverse teaching workforce. 4, support legislation that public school districts are not responsible for assessing the substantial equivalency of education delivered in non-public schools. NISBA adopted Legislative Resolution 12. And 5, development and maintenance of legislative relationships with local and state lawmakers to ensure district stability. And what that to me means is I have to reach out to these people besides this breakfast. Throughout the year, I need to be reaching out and developing a relationship. It can't be just some once a year thing because nothing's going to come from that. So I know that I have to step up my efforts right there. The administration might have some items for discussion, including the BOCES request. I don't know. With that, I'm done. I can't hear you, Van.
Yeah, I'm just going to go to my full screen to see if there's anybody who has any questions for Commissioner Adams. I see Commissioner LeBron.
Yeah, thank you. With the MOU increased request, Mr. Adams, I would request that we also be very specific in our request and ask for that MOU to be restructured to be a percentage of the city's total budget. Otherwise, if we are locked into a monetary amount, as their budget increases, we're going to continue to have the same monetary amount locked in. And then what happens over time with inflation, we end up with a smaller percentage of what they intended to. And so we've been stuck at this 119 million for a number of years, but their budget has increased. They've increased education taxes for City of Rochester residents. And oftentimes taxpayers believe that those increases are increases coming to the district, and they're not. So I would like us to be very specific to state legislators to ask for a percentage of the budget versus a dollar amount. And so whatever, we can factor what that percentage would look like if 119 was factored 10 years ago with inflation. I'm sure that there's a formula that we can plug in to understand what percentage that was, a decade ago. But that's something I 100% support, but I just want it to be a percentage amount versus an actual dollar amount. Thank you.
And I support that as well. Would you take note of that, Kaya?
We have documented that. Thanks, Commissioner Adams. Also looking for more input as well from other commissioners regarding the other items listed.
I see Commissioner Powell has raised her hand.
Sort of to piggyback on that last conversation about increase from the city, should it be plausible at all? Should it get any traction at all? One of the ways that we could keep up with, not entirely keep up with inflation, but currently the tax bills that go out to property owners specify a specific rate per $1,000 of assessed value, both for the city and for the school district. If all that happened was that we were to lock in that rate, just by virtue of increase in property values, we would benefit. I don't know that it would be equal to the rate of inflation, but it certainly would be equal to any rate that the city gives itself.
I don't see any other hands being raised. I will note that I have made this argument myself on many occasions to City Council directly, to our previously elected officials in the Assembly and the Senate. You don't have to be a Einstein to figure out what's been happening with taxpayer money in the city for years. The city has increased the levy, and how they do that is they tell property owners that their house is no longer valued at $75,000, it's valued at $125,000. So they don't increase your taxes directly, but they just get more money. Now here's the thing, and a number of people said this, they've gotten more money, but they haven't increased the share that city school district needs to do its job. And quite often you hear people say, even at 131 West Broad Street, well, why do you need more money? You got fewer students. Well, nobody says that about the city. Our population is decreased in the city, but yet the levy goes up. The collection ability of the city goes up. Why? Because they argue that the services that city residents need are much more intense than they used to be. Sure, we have fewer residents, they argue, but we need the money to provide the services that city residents need. Well, why isn't that argument equally persuasive for the district? Everybody's also saying, you know, we got fewer students, so we should need less money. Well, the city doesn't take to that argument, and they've collected more money to do the job that they need to do. And I just don't see why that same logic would not apply to us. So thank you, Commissioner Adams. The question is Commissioner Powell has indicated, will we get any traction out of this? This is a very tough hill to climb. And I just hope that we, through your leadership, have some success at it, because I know there are people say we don't need more money, that we need to tighten our belts, and no one is saying we don't need to tighten our belts, but our children need to be fed. Our children need to be nourished appropriately. So not looking to have an argument with anybody about that, but I'm glad to see that that is an item on your agenda, Commissioner Adams, because I think the time has come for, I'm going to call it, for this community to deal with that hypocrisy. They say they need more money with fewer citizens, but yet we're not allowed to say that for the services that we need to provide for our kids. I see Commissioner LeBron has raised her hand. Commissioner LeBron?
Yeah, I just want to say, last year I did watch the mayor go in front of the legislative body and ask them to, you know, I think she goes every year, and so this is on record and people can go look it up, but go and ask them to reduce the MOU and the requirement of the 119 million on this notion that we have declining student enrollment, and that those students are being served at charters and we're not serving them. But I do want to remind, and have this on record, but remind my community and the mayor that students, even at charter schools, we are still responsible for a number of services, even though they may be physically located in a charter. And so those expenditures are not 100% decreased from our budget. We are still responsible for the services. Even though we're a pass-through agency, we still share transportation, special education. There are a number of different areas. And so, you know, I was surprised that we had our mayor advocating for that. But again, if we had a percentage of what the budget is versus a set amount, then there's no question about that. And in addition to that argument around decreasing student enrollment, I hear both sides of this and I get both sides. But the reality is that expenditures go up every year anyway. So we can continue to cut down, and we are trying our best to do that at this moment. But the reality is that there are some debt services that will continue to increase no matter how much, we cut staff or cut services and programs. And so again, this is something, Mr. Adams, that I definitely want to support and have lots of argument points for anybody who comes up with an alternative argument to it. Thank you.
Commissioner Adams, as we see that many of us, we all seem to be somewhat on the same page, which is a very good sign. And as Commissioner Powell has indicated, this is as I have indicated, This is an uphill battle. Anybody who's ever been to Albany knows what a hill you have to climb to get to the Capitol. Well, this is probably about the equivalent of that. This is very tough. So, Commissioner Adams, what I'd like to talk to you about offline as part of, the regular check-ins that the committee chairs and I do, is might we do something? I realize these are all very good priorities, but might we do something a little bit different here? Might we strategize a little bit differently, since there seems to be, we had a number of parents speak today and a number of them addressed this issue. So I'd like to talk to you about, because quite often what happens is we get these priorities and we don't, I'll just speak honestly, not to your effort, Commissioner Adams, we don't do anything with them. They become our priorities and nobody really talks about them. So maybe we as a board or individually as board members, we should talk about, is there something different we can do? Because there's an opportunity. We have new legislators, and it wouldn't surprise me if some of these new legislators agreed with a number of things that have been said today about how the city manages its finances. And by the way, we also have some new members on city council it wouldn't surprise me if they agreed with some of the stuff that has been said. So maybe, again, perhaps for another time, perhaps offline, we should be talking about a different kind of strategy for this very important goal, because as we, and we'll get to it later today in one of the resolutions, as we talk about our financial plan, which includes years into the future, Lord have mercy, this would be a different conversation if we were successfully able to climb up that hill and get a greater, more definitive share of the proceeds. So, Commissioner Adams, thank you again. Any other questions or comments for Commissioner Adams? Commissioner Adams, I did have one other thing that came up in our officers meeting today. Leslie, you might be able to help me out with this, and Kalia, you might as well. We have been informed that there is a statute, I believe it's a law that requires, executive order actually is what it is, that requires that we have all of our meetings transcribed. Now, as a lawyer, I can tell you, it's very expensive to transcribe a conversation, extremely expensive. And Ms. Wade has confirmed this in a meeting this morning. The cost would be prohibitive. If we comply with this executive order that requires all virtual meetings to be transcribed, we would be digging a deeper hole. And many of you have said the hole is already very deep enough. So, Commissioner Adams, this is the reason why I bring this up to you and to my colleagues. Is there any way to add on this very aggressive agenda of priorities to speak to our legislators about giving some kind of exemption? Because if Brighton or Pittsburgh has to do this, they don't have half the meetings we have. They don't have the long speakers like me speaking. It's going to be very expensive. So I'm wondering if we could add that to the agenda. Leslie and Ms. Wade and I and Vice President Elliott talked about it this afternoon. It's going to be very expensive to do this. And I'm wondering if we did this, and we were successful. Let's say Assemblyperson Meeks introduces legislation that says Rochester should have an exemption for this. This costs tens of thousands of dollars. No joke. It's going to be very expensive. Might that also be, Commissioner Adams, a quick win? When Commissioner Powell talks about that steep hill to climb for this greater portion of city tax revenues, that's going to be tough. But you could have a quick win if we could get Assemblyperson Meeks to say to his colleagues, this is not fair to Rochester. They've got to hire teachers. They got to keep teachers. They got to keep social workers. They got to lay off people. We should not be having them spend tens of thousands of dollars for Zoom meetings, which are recorded and are put on the website. Ms. Wade, do you want to add anything to convince, hopefully, Commissioner Adams to take this on?
No, not at this time. We will discuss further in executive session.
Commissioner Powell?
Yeah, thanks. You said that this was an executive order, in which case the only person that we need to convince is the governor.
That's true.
And I think that you've already articulated the counter argument, which is the Zoom calls are recorded. They are available for viewing online. I take transcripts of parts of the meetings myself in order to be very clear about what I heard. Especially when speakers, when a speaker makes a remark, I'll take down word for word what they said so that I understand the message. since sadly they often don't transmit their remarks, which in many cases they're clearly reading to us, so that they can be captured that way. But if it's an executive order, it seems to me that governor is the only person who can rescind that order. And, but perhaps we can recruit the help of the Big Five or NYSBA. NYSBA has a standing resolution against unfunded mandates. And this, you know, they might be able to mobilize some resources on our behalf.
Okay, Commissioner Adams, did you want to respond to any of that?
Yes. First of all, I can't wait to march on Albany. I cannot wait to march on Albany. As soon as things open back up, because DeMond Meeks alone can't do it by himself. He need all of us on board, pushing. That's what we got to do. This got to be done as a community effort, and I'm willing to lead that. But before we move on, I just wanted to circle back and make sure nobody from the administration, because we're going to need them on board with all of this stuff too. This MOU stuff, the marching, the Albany. She need to be able to let some of those staff go to Albany with me as soon as I can get this bus together, as soon as they open back up. Did they have any commenters about this breakfast, this agenda? Anybody from the staff, executive committee?
Commissioner Adams, we had an opportunity to look them over and make any edits or additional things. And so we're in agreement with what is submitted.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Adams, one final option, given what Commissioner Powell said, and I think she's absolutely correct. We don't, you're correct too. DeMond can't do this himself and doesn't have to. But to Commissioner Powell's point, this really, this is an executive order. It's not something that comes out of the Capitol itself. So I suppose we have another option. Either you or I, and I would defer to your judgment, on behalf of the board, could send the governor a letter, or the guy who does the, I forgot the guy's name, who's his budget person. We could find the right person and just send them a letter and just gently and carefully and graciously say, we can't afford to do this. Does anybody have any opposition to Commissioner Adams or myself drafting a letter, which of course you would see before it went out, looking for that kind of exemption from the governor? I don't see why he wouldn't listen. I see Commissioner Powell and then Dr. Myers has raised her hand.
I certainly don't have an objection, but I wonder if Dr. Jallo would be able to get someone's ear and argue our case for us.
Yes, I would. I've read your platform for the legislative breakfast and beyond. I had also recommended one other item, and that's to have the legislators also lobby on behalf of the district for some kind of compensation as it relates to BOCES and the BOCES services that we currently use for the district, and somehow getting access to the discounted fee structure that is used by many other districts. And that would be something that I would also recommend being added to the list so that we can somehow get that kind of support from BOCES. But we would need legislative support in order to have that happen as well. Other than that, I'm willing to support your legislative platform as you've outlined it this evening. And yes, I will talk to whoever you think is appropriate at the state level to make sure we have those entries and those openings for those type of conversations to move it forward.
Thank you. I see Dr. Myers has raised her hand.
Right. What Dr. Jallo said, it was exactly where I was going. There was one additional piece, and that's the BOCES reimbursement that suburban districts can participate in. When you purchase BOCES services, it's aidable. And we currently we're not able to do that. So if we could add that, Commissioner Adams, as a friendly amendment, that would be great. And we can provide the language if you'd like, if that's okay.
Yep, yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Adams, are you looking for an approval of this, or is this going to go on your next, you said Thursday, next business meeting? Is that what you said? You're muted. Commissioner Adams, you're muted.
I think I said December 17th.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Gotcha.
I just have one friendly amendment. So because of the fact that we don't have a CIGR committee meeting this month, that's why we've placed them on the special meeting agendas. And so this is the first iteration, but we have another meeting where we will touch again on the legislative agenda, and persons will have an opportunity to review the updated version, and we will be sure to include the BOCES reimbursement legislation to it, and persons can have another chance to weigh in on any additional items, but it is intended that the legislative agenda will be voted on in the December 17th business meeting for adoption.
All right. Thank you very much. Commissioner Adams, was there anything else?
Yes, I think we should probably get that letter out sooner than later.
Okay, I'll work on something, send it to you first, and then we'll figure it out how to get to the board. Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda was, actually, it's the first reading of the discussion item, online credit course recovery, credit course policy 4765. You all were sent a copy of that. Madam Clerk, were you going to say something?
Yes, so following the last policy committee meeting on November 3rd, commissioners did forward the policy 4765 out of committee, and an informational item was sent via email so that persons could see the policy language. This is the first reading as a discussion item here in the special meeting. It will be a discussion item again, one more time on another special meeting agenda, and it will hopefully be adopted or will be considered for adoption in the December business meeting. But at this time, if there are any questions, any suggested edits to online learning and course credit policy 4765, now is your time to let us know. Deputy Superintendent Morris would have presented this, but she is unfortunately away today. So I'm just letting persons know, if you have any questions regarding the policy, you can also send it through me, and I can make sure it's answered by Deputy Superintendent Morris.
I'm just trying to check out the participants, see if anybody's raised their hand. Rahima, are you, I see a little green thing for you, Rahima. What, do you know why is that? Are you raising your hand? Right?
No, I'm sharing the screen.
Oh, that means you're sharing the screen. Okay, all right, thank you. For those of you who don't know, I won't go into it the way Commissioner Powell can, but we're very methodical about how we introduce policy changes. Our bylaws require that we take certain steps. This step is an opportunity for the board to look at a policy, discuss it before feeling any pressure to vote on it. So that's why it's on the agenda today. Board members have seen this. The deputy superintendent and the superintendent have introduced this concept. And Superintendent Myers, you'll correct me, I'm sure if I'm wrong. The reason why this has been sort of fast-tracked is, of course, COVID sort of came on us, and we needed to make sure that we had policies that were reflective of where the superintendent and the board wanted us to, and district staff to go. So this policy, a copy of it is available to you right now if you happen to be watching us on Facebook or YouTube. Alternatively, Madam Clerk, is this on board docs?
This is on board docs, correct. There is a clean copy, and there's also a copy in track changes as is protocol. So if persons have any questions on any changes that may have been made to the policy, this was not a policy that we had on the books before, but we received the verbiage from NISBA, and we made very few changes to the suggested language, and what you have in front of you right now is what we're hoping to be adopted.
Thank you very much. I'm looking at the participant list. I don't see anybody raising their hand. So there's the discussion. Doesn't mean that we won't be continuing to discuss this and developing it offline. I know the administration worked hard to develop that policy and tweak NISBA's policy. So this will be on again, Madam Clerk. When will this be on again? Oops, you're muted.
Sorry about that. It will be on again on next week, Tuesday's audit, before the audit committee meets for a special meeting.
Perfect. Thank you very much. All right, next item on the agenda is a consideration resolution. At this point, for those of you who are tuned into this board meeting, as you know, everything the board does has to be done in writing. Anything that we ask or direct the superintendent or the staff to do has to be in writing, and those writings are called resolutions. They're like our version of the law. We have to vote on them. A majority of the board members have to agree. So on occasion, the superintendent brings resolutions to us for us to consider. This is a very short list of resolutions tonight. There's only 2. Normally we can, I think we've had more than 100. This is a very short series of resolutions. And so without further explanation, I'm going to ask that one of my colleagues make a motion to discuss resolution 502.
Motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. Is there a second to that? Thank you, Commissioner Clark, I think I heard.
Yes.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from any of the board members regarding resolution 502? For those of you who are watching, you know, some resolutions there are no questions or issues. Sometimes board members have had the opportunity to talk to members of the administration. This one is sort of a sad one for many of us. Carl Christoph, who we've already gave our goodbyes to, served this administration and this district in an exemplary way. He is a exceptional lawyer, a role model, a committed public servant, and he will be missed. But Carl is retiring from the district, but certainly not retiring from the practice of serving citizens. So Carl, if you happen to be watching, and I doubt that you are, I know the board wishes to once again thank you for your years of service. We really appreciate you. That was my comment. Anybody else have any additional comments? All right, then let's go ahead and vote. As reluctant as we might be to see Carl's resignation confirmed, all those in favor of resolution 502 indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? It seems like the ayes have it. Carl, again, thank you for your service. We won't say goodbye because we know we will be working with you in some capacity in the future. Next, I need a motion to discuss resolution 505. Is there a motion? Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Adams. This particular resolution relates to the financial and the academic plan that the independent monitor has submitted and the board has approved. Are there any questions or comments regarding resolution 505? There being no questions or comments, on behalf of the board, I want to thank Dr. Jallo for working with this board. She has gotten into the weeds and came up with some flowers here. And what I mean by that is the flowers are, this is very specific. What we've lacked in the past is specifics that might drive areas of improvement. And this was by no means an easy endeavor. This vote will go very quick, but I know Dr. Jallo has appreciation of the Board of Education and the superintendent for the many months of work that went into this effort. And we hope and pray, as I indicated earlier on, 2021 will be the first year that we'll see the fruits of our labor. Any other questions or comments? There being no questions or comments, all those in favor of resolution 505 indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition?
Aye.
Seems the ayes have it. Dr. Jallo, congratulations and thank you very much for your work. You too are appreciated. Next item on the Dr. Jallo, what did you say?
I was saying congratulations to you, and I just want to repeat that you know, it's not over. The door is still open. The communication should continue to flow, and still open to listening to whoever has ideas about how we can work together and improve the districts. I don't want people to think, you know, that's it. There's no more conversations. There's no more meetings. There's no more interviews. There's no more discussion. it continues.
And I also wanted to add something I mentioned in our officers meeting. These new plans, I should say plans, academic and financial, will require that we get clarity from the state on what we are going to use as we figure out our path as we go forward. Folks should not be confused. The board worked diligently and very hard on a plan that came in the wake of the distinguished educator. That plan has not been thrown out, but it would appear to me that too many plans might complicate things. And it seems to me, since the board has vetted these proposals, has worked with this independent monitor for these two plans, that a letter should be sent to the state indicating that we've approved this and that we seek direction from them about what plans we should be submitting that we are monitoring and we are executing. In other words, many of you haven't forgotten, we devised a plan in the wake of what's his name? Dr. Kino. And that plan was exhaustive, but it is clear that these are the plans that should be driving us forward. So I'm asking for your permission. Of course, I'll send you a draft, noting that, assuming that this resolution passes, that we would tell the Commissioner of Education that, but we would also be seeking direction, some finality about us not pursuing with any effort, the plan that they had previously approved. All right, I think there ought to be clarity, because at a certain point, people are going to be judging us, and we should know what they're judging us on. And it appears, since Dr. Jallo has made these recommendations and we have supported them, that this is the plan that we should be judged on. And by the way, we judge the superintendent on her ability to carry out her strategic plan, which has been vetted before the board as well. Any objection to me drafting a letter? Of course, I'll send it to you all. You can make whatever changes you deem appropriate, and then we'll send that on along with the resolution to the commissioner. That makes sense to everybody? Kalia, could you make sure that you and I get some time together to make sure we get this done ASAP?
Will do.
Thank you. All right. Again, thank you, Dr. Jallo. So we have to vote. All those in favor of resolution 505. Oh, did we vote already?
You already voted.
All right, so that allows me to turn the gavel over to Commissioner Malloy. Is that right? Yep.
Thank you, President White. Good evening to Dr. Myers-Small, to Dr. Jallo, our executive cabinet members, my fellow board members, and those of you from the community. For our community members who are listening in tonight, I am Commissioner Amy Malloy and am the Governance Committee Chair. I'm just going to very quickly repeat the purpose of the Governance Committee. Board governance deals directly with board oversight, or simply put, how we conduct ourselves and monitor our conduct as board members. So our purpose here is to work with our fellow board members to determine our collective board development needs. We coordinate training to enhance our ability to perform as board commissioners. We're also responsible for maintaining an effective working relationship with our superintendent. Our committee facilitates the orientation of our new members with our board staff. And I would like to graciously extend an official welcome to our newest board member, Mr. William Clark. So welcome, sir. So looking forward to assisting you in your orientation with our board staff. Governance is also tasked with annually updating the superintendent and their evaluation tool. We supervise and evaluate our board staff. We work with board members to modify as necessary the board staff evaluation tool. As a board, we continue to develop plans articulating how board committees will work with the full board and superintendent in coordinated effort to achieve our annual goals, which we just came up with in October. The Governance Committee organizes board retreats for our ongoing professional development, and last but certainly not least, board governance helps to oversee the implementation of the Distinguished Educator Action Items as part of the DE report. So we have a very light agenda this evening, possibly record-setting, I dare say, my fellow commissioners, but of course I've probably just jinxed myself, so here we go. Our discussion items this evening include a presentation about the resolutions update which is about the reformatting of resolutions in a more user-friendly and transparent format, which will, I hope, greatly help commissioners and the community better understand the specific details and overarching ramifications of individual resolutions. So here to present on this topic this evening is our District Communications Chief, Marisol Lopez. Welcome, Ms. Lopez, and thank you in advance for your presentation.
Good evening, Commissioner Malloy, and good evening, commissioners. I wanted to provide you an update on the resolutions review process that we've been undertaking. And Kalia, thank you very much for sharing the screen. We can move on to the next slide. Where are we today and how did we get here? So prior to joining the administration team, you will remember that I was the district clerk and I started working with Dr. Jallo and an internal group of individuals to look at the resolutions process. Some of the issues that were brought up were late resolutions with incomplete, incorrect, or misleading information, the board's frustration, and the concerns from the independent monitor. A multidisciplinary team was convened July of 2020. Next slide, please. And we reviewed the standard operating procedures for the resolutions process. We reviewed an internal documentation resolution development and went through the entire process of how resolutions are developed from soup to nuts. And then we researched and reviewed the best practices from other districts throughout the state. We also brainstormed ways to create efficiencies, eliminate silos, and more effectively communicate the intent and outcomes of these items. So where are we going? On phase one, we are looking at changing the calendar for submission to include a 6-week lead time prior to business meeting submission. This reduces the public discourse with the board members related to resolutions that have not properly been vetted or discussed. It allows for greater community discussion and understanding of the resolutions and for proper documentation to be submitted to supplement resolutions. In the example of financial plans, further documentations on contracts, and additional documentations on programs, including data and measurable outcomes. So we're looking at beginning implementation starting January 2021 for the February 2021 business meeting. The process for submitting board requests as it stands right now is on a 4-week timeline. And we're looking at extending that to a 6-week timeline to include contract requests, personnel authorization forms, and resolution language modification. So any contract request approval submitted by December 22nd will be included in the February resolutions packet. Personnel authorization forms are due on the 22nd of December as well. And finance, teaching and learning, and additional pay and any other resolutions will be due on December 29th for the February resolutions packet. We're also working with the Office of the General Counsel to determine what needs to be included as a minimum in the resolutions language. And we have had some discussion about some of the language in the whereas and resolved areas. So what you see here, and I'm sorry that it is so small and detailed, is what a board meeting calendar would look like in terms of when items are due for submission to the General Counsel's office for review by the superintendent and the executive cabinet, and then for submission through the committee meetings, and finally to the board meeting for final acceptance. And I can provide this information in more detail to you. You do have a copy of this presentation, and this presentation is also on board docs. The other issue that we discussed was the order of resolutions. And a few meetings ago, we also had a discussion related to the order of resolutions and placing the resolutions in under titles that best represent what the resolutions are. So we're looking at changing the order to include gift resolutions, teaching and learning will include any contracts, any programs and requests for additional pay specific to teaching and learning, human resources, finance and budget, facilities, and procurement and supply. And these are the areas of focus that will also align with the superintendent's strategic plan. The other area that we're including at the request of Dr. Jallo is a financial analysis. And we've come up with a list of things to consider when the administration is putting together their financial analysis. And these are the questions that we start with in order to best answer and provide the most detail to you on any resolutions that are requiring us to expend dollars for the district. As I already mentioned, our strategic plan priorities will be tied into any resolutions that are presented to you, and we've already started that practice, so that when you see a resolution, you will see an area of focus, and they are numbered, and each of the bulleted points are also a number. So example, engage and implement student-centered learning would be 1.1. etc. So you should, in today's resolutions that you just approved, you should also see those strategic plan priorities are coordinated and correlated with the resolutions. So the next steps in this process, we've already begun by introducing the changes to administration. Executive Cabinet is aware of these changes. We will also be making presentations to individual department members who process and submit contracts as well as resolutions in the legal department, HR, finance, facilities, procurement, and supply. And then on phase 2, this is phase 1, we're going to continue the resolution language review, board docs integration, and I know that District Clerk Wade has brought that issue up to you. And then the final thing that we're working on is resolution writing training. We'd like to make sure that individuals throughout the organization understand the process for putting together a resolution, and that this process does not depend on only one person. So as a pilot, we are starting with the gift resolutions, and those will be developed by the originating department. We've removed that from the responsibility of the district clerk so that we can start working on some training for resolution development. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions from you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lopez. I'm just looking for hands. Are there any questions or comments from our commissioners, or perhaps from Dr. Jallo, our state monitor? Oops, I see Commissioner LeBron. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to thank you guys, because I definitely have been a commissioner who has complained and felt frustrated about our resolutions, not only how they're presented, but how they come through. And I'm not one who is comfortable voting on resolutions when we haven't had ample time to kind of review it. And, you know, it's really frustrating when we have like the loophole of being able to walk resolutions on the floor or submit them, you know, a day or two, or sometimes 2 hours before a meeting. But instead of being it on an emergency basis, it started to become a norm, which was again very frustrating. So I want to thank you and the entire team that worked on a solution to a systemic issue. So hopefully moving forward, this will help resolve some of that frustration and allow myself and my colleagues to have the time necessary to read and understand what exactly we're voting for and what impacts it may have in other areas. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Commissioner LeBron. I see Commissioner Powell's hand.
Yeah, I wonder if Marisol could put up the PowerPoint page again that had the resolution timeline for us to look at. And could you talk to us about how specifically what is different? Does the administration need to have a resolution put together sooner than currently?
So we are using a phased-in approach, Commissioner Powell.
Yeah.
Traditionally, the timeline has been a 4-week process. We are now converting that into a 6-week process. So for December resolutions, if there are some items that can be put off until January, for January resolutions that can be put off till February, we will utilize that timeline to begin that transition. We have changed some of the requirements on deadlines for contract submission and for the submission of other resolutions to ensure that we start meeting this timeline.
I think that's going to be really important, especially given Dr. Jallo's recommendations about including cost analysis, in the packet. My concern is this: the training you mentioned is really critical here, because we already have cases of resolutions missing deadlines, and that problem would only become accelerated if the deadlines are coming up sooner, especially around personnel type items, I think. Many resolutions can wait and should not be rushed, but others, when it comes to, putting a teacher in front of a classroom because of a retirement, a resignation, medical leave, what have you, what is the remedy for those situations?
So there are always going to be situations where we are going to be required to come before the board to request an exception because we have a retirement, because we have an urgency or an emergency, and we certainly hope that you will be understanding of those moments. We are trying to make them few and far in between, and we have already eliminated the number of resolutions that you're reviewing at your Tuesday committee of the whole meetings.
Okay, thank you.
Should probably unmute myself. Okay. Thank you again, Ms. Lopez. Are there any other questions from our commissioners? Any other comments? Dr. Myers, anything? Okay. So thank you very much. If there aren't any further comments, I just want to move on to our next agenda item, our board meeting poll results discussion. As you know, we've been conducting end of meeting polls for the last 6 months or so to help guide us in our work. The New York State School Boards Association, as well as the Monroe County School Boards Association, both of these bodies recommend regular polling of members to analyze whether or not we are meeting specific board goals, among other things. So we've been participating in these informal polls at the end of our regularly scheduled business meetings for several months now via Zoom polling. And the analysis of the results of this polling indicated, we talked about this last month, that the Zoom didn't always pull the polls accurately. Some of the polls weren't necessarily being completed by all members regularly. And in some instances, these polls weren't taking place. We were forgetting to do them. So I would like to suggest to fellow board members that we consider the key performance indicators we wish to measure moving forward in order to ensure that our polls are accurate and useful. I did mention at our last governance meeting that the data from our polls was kind of all over the place, and that we averaged about 5 commissioners taking this poll out of 7. For a short time, we only had 6 commissioners because one of our commissioners had left. So we want to make sure that the questions we ask help guide us in our work, and that it's data that we can actually use to inform us in our work. So, what we need to consider and decide as a board is, who ultimately who will be taking these polls? What's the purpose of this polling? Are the questions we have been asking each time, are they sufficient? And finally, is this polling ultimately useful? So we discussed this briefly at last month's meeting, and then received some feedback from board members. And I've asked our board clerk, Ms. Calloway, to maybe briefly provide an overview of the current polling results, but I guess I can go through that with everyone. I just want us to ascertain if we need to change the questions, or perhaps ask our members who maybe weren't here at our last meeting if there are any changes they'd like to see made. So if we could just pull those up. Thanks, I gotta go to this different view screen. Okay. All right, so currently the questions that we've been asking at the end of our board meetings, you can see them up on the screen. Did you receive your materials in a sufficient amount of time? Were the materials sufficient to assist you in forming an opinion on the decisions made by the board? Did we adhere to the start and end times as stated? Were you satisfied with your opportunity to participate in the debate? Were there any violations of our code of conduct? Were you satisfied with the manner in which other board members contributed to the debate? Was the chair effective in allowing all sides to be heard? Did we do anything that made a clear difference in the lives of our students? I'm hoping we can maybe ask more questions surrounding that specifically, or make a few more questions. Did we do anything that had a positive impact on any one of the strategic plan goals? And finally, were there any violations of our bylaws? So just in looking at these, I'm wondering, does anyone have perhaps a different question that they think should be asked? Are these questions okay for you to continue answering? So I just want to have a very brief discussion, just perhaps seeing how people are feeling about our current questions and whether you'd like to see some changes. So I'm going to look at my participation screen. I'm not seeing any hands. So maybe I'll just ask each individual board member, are we okay with this as a group? How are people feeling? I just need to get some feedback.
Restate the question. The dog was barking. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. So I just want to know how people are feeling about the current questions that we have. Are these useful questions for us to continue asking? How are you feeling? Are some of them redundant? Do we need to make changes? So I just am trying to get an informal poll of board members to find out how we're feeling about the current questions that we have in place. Oops. Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Powell.
Thank you for restating the question. I've been thinking about this since it was last brought up, and it occurred to me that if there were areas in our current polling data that suggest that we don't have a big problem, for instance, starting and ending on time, or adhering to the agenda, that maybe those questions could be dropped, and in doing so, make room for some areas to be expanded. For instance, the strategic plan goals, could we break those down, into the
perhaps by goal.
so that folks could sort of pinpoint where they thought we were effectively using our time versus and making a difference versus not.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. Duly noted. Is there anyone else who'd like to comment on some? I'm looking at my participation screen and not seeing any hands.
I guess I would agree with with Commissioner Powell. And one of the questions that we could expand on is question number 8, where we felt we made a difference in the lives of our students. Just expand on how we felt that happened.
Thank you, Commissioner Clark. Thank you. President White, go ahead.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add is if we're going to add some questions that we figure out what questions might be eliminated. I think Commissioner Powell suggested that maybe if I think this is what she said, if we're not having a problem with meetings starting on time, then maybe we eliminate that one. I see the value in what Commissioner Clark and you, Commissioner Malloy, have recommended. My only concern would be, if we're not eliminating questions and we're adding questions, it might make it a little more time challenging. And I think one of the values—
10 questions, is that right, Kalia? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. So actually, we can ask more than 10 questions. And we can, to one of the questions at last time, we can launch different polls during different parts of the meeting. It just, of course, procedurally and operationally, we'd have to figure out how that does work. I know that last time there was feedback from Commissioner Adams regarding shortening the number of questions because of the amount of time it does take to get through them and really read and respond.
Thank you, Ms. White. And thank you, President White. I didn't mean to interrupt you there. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. I don't have an answer for that issue that I raised. But as Kaya correctly indicated, Commissioner Adams did indicate that maybe it should be shortened. And then I think the solution might be something like, well, as Commissioner Powell suggested, if finding out we're making progress, or we're starting meetings on time isn't an issue anymore, then maybe we can eliminate that question and expound on, I think it was question number 8, or whatever other questions you want to expound on.
Yeah, I know personally I would love to see 8 changed in some way or made more specific, expand it to include other information. So Commissioner Clark, thank you for that recommendation, and thank you, President White, and thank you, Commissioner Powell. I do see Dr. Jallow has her hand up. Go ahead.
Hi. Yes, good evening. I think that maybe your questions should be organized by your goals. So they're grouped by goals, or they're aligned to your goals, so that you, at the end of a certain period of time, can see progress that you have made as a board as it relates to the goals that you set. I think it was last month or month before last. I think that might be something to consider.
Thank you, Dr. Jallow. Julie noted. All right. Any other questions regarding polling? Okay. So I will work with board staff to have an update on this. And thank you, Ms. Wade, for all your work that you've been doing on this and for taking those notes. Let me exit out of this quickly. So if there aren't further questions, yeah, so if there aren't any further questions, we'll move ahead to our next discussion item. Our next item on the agenda has us continuing a discussion from last month on our district's communications protocol. I'm going to once again turn the time over to our communications chief, Marisol Lopez, who will be providing us with this update. Ms. Lopez, thank you.
Actually, I believe I will be doing the update this
time. Are you providing the update? My bad.
We did a little bit of procedural change really quickly. In the November 3rd governance meeting, we did present, and the board did adopt, the communications protocol between the district administration and board. There has been one suggested change, and I'm going to just share that it's in track changes because of the fact that the document has been already adopted. You will see on your screen, and you do have in your packet, this amended document. And this has to do with presentations to the board. Having reviewed in our preview governance meeting with Commissioner Malloy, and having talked to our communications chief, Mr. Ramos Lopez, there are some times where the board does receive presentations, as you know, during special meetings, during board meetings, during work sessions, where we receive information, data, updates on the operations of the district, or other financial reports, etc. And there wasn't strict clarity on how that information is received by the board. So this edit to the document really just does indicate for persons who are presenting to the board how those presentations are expected, and essentially asking for presentations to be distilled and accompanied by visual documentation. We're asking for a PowerPoint, which is just a general understanding, and that will help to facilitate review and discussion of the item. As the board knows, there have been times in the past where we have been presented with data and there isn't sufficient PowerPoint or things to follow along. So this just kind of distills that information here. And the one other thing, kind of in line with some of the things that we've been talking about with the resolutions, and even as we talk about just making procedures and protocols a little bit more firm, is that any materials that are sent for presenting to the board, we ask that they are sent within 48 hours. This is also in our board bylaws as well. So that's just kind of distilling that into this document. So that is just the suggested change, but because of the fact that the document has already been accepted, we wanted to make sure that that was shown as a potential edit if the board does accept it.
Commissioner Malloy, I also do have one addition that District Clerk Wade and I discussed, and that is there are times when the board is asking the administration to provide a response on different items, be it internal audits that have been conducted or other materials that the board receives that they share with the administration and wish for the administration to have a response on, we would like the same timing to apply for that. There have been situations where documents are provided to board members and have not been provided to the administration, but a response is expected during a meeting. And so in order for us to be able to appropriately respond to any questions that you have, we have to have the opportunity to adequately review those items.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there questions regarding the communications protocol from any of our commissioners? Commissioner Powell, go ahead.
Follow up on what Marisol just said. Was that specifically in that red line version?
Not Commissioner Powell. That is something that Kalia and I had a discussion on a few weeks ago and then late this afternoon. So we will be adding that and sending it to you. I just wanted to make sure that it made it into the discussion and that you were aware of some of the concerns that the administration was having.
Well, the reason I ask is you did mention Audit Committee, so audit documents. And I want to be careful that that our communications protocol is compatible with the Hevesy law. The audit functions as very specifically functions as a result of New York state law, and the Auditor General does not report to the superintendent. However, all of the documents that result from the Auditor General's work are essentially the product of both the administration and the Auditor General. The administration has already responded to all audit reports, and the response is part of that report. In the case of the CAFR, that's actually a product of the CFO that's been reviewed by the Auditor General. So before we add any language, I want to make sure that any language that we might consider be kind of tested against the Hevesy law.
There are times when we work on a document together and then a final document is released, and we receive the finalized document at the same time as the board, and the expectation is that we'll respond to the document during a meeting. There may be other people involved who weren't part of that compilation of that document and haven't had the opportunity to review it. So I do not want to violate the Hevesy rule, and we will be very conscious of that and have the conversation with you, Commissioner Powell. I want to be clear that we want to come to meetings prepared. We want to be ready to answer any questions that you have. However, unfortunately, if we receive documents that are late, we'll have to indicate that and maybe come back with a response at a later time.
I just want to, well, we could probably have an offline conversation. It's just that this is a document that is owned as much by the administration as it is by the Auditor General. So there should not be anything in those documents that that the administration isn't already aware of. I think the biggest problem we've faced has been extraordinary turnover. And I don't know that we can lay blame at anyone's heels for that, but let's work on the issue offline. How's that?
Sounds good.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. Do we have any other questions or comments? I'm not seeing any hands. Okay, thank you so much, Chief Marisol Lopez, Ramos Lopez, sorry, I always do that. And then also to Ms. Wade, thank you very much. Our final agenda item this evening is our updated professional development calendar. One of the potential, one of the potential professional developments that we're going to be working on is related to what we've been compiling from our poll data discussion. And I'm hoping that we can schedule this along with other professional development over the next 1 or 2 months. So I need to work with our board staff. One of the things we're going to be working on, you'll see, is we need to schedule part 2 of best practices for improving academics, which will take place after part 1, which is scheduled for January 12th and will be presented by Dr. Melody Martinez. But we have a lot of other professional development to schedule as well. And so if you want to look through this document, I'm going to be working closely with board staff to come up with some feasible dates. Kalia, is there any other information that you could provide us?
Yes, so I just wanted to highlight for board members the upcoming PD that are happening in January, which is firstly, after the organizational meeting on January 4th, we'll be having a presentation on Robert's Rules of Order that is going to be well received, I think, especially given that we do have a new commissioner with us. That will really help to lay the basis for conducting of meetings for the remainder of the school year and beyond. And that will take place directly after the organizational meeting. As you know, that meeting is normally only about 30 minutes. And so we'll be able to dive right into the Robert's Rules of Order. And do thank Mr. Carling for volunteering to lead that for us. After that, I just wanted to make one small correction. Actually, it will be Dr. Morris who will be presenting that best practices for improving academics part 1 PD session. And it will take place in the ESA Committee of the Whole. She's going to be sharing about how to access data for the district, and she'll also be spotlighting a school in the district to kind of highlight those efforts, and for board members who kind of want to follow along, and for the public as well. We do welcome all of our community members, our parents, and our students to join us for a PD on that. Following that, in February, will be a presentation on the FMP process, and that is something that we do annually and is put on by our Rochester Joint School Boards Construction Board, and they'll be joining us to provide that presentation. In January early as well, we will also be revisiting our budgeting practices and PD on title funds. So those are the ones that are really coming up. The ones that you see TBD will be dispersed throughout the remainder of the academic year leading up to June 30th. So those we'll still be plugging those in, and every time we make an update, we will be sure to update the board members. And also for the public, this is posted on our website. So if you want to find out what kind of training our board is receiving, what kind of professional development they are receiving, you can also go ahead and check that whenever it is updated on the website.
Thank you so much, Ms. Wade. Thank you. I do see a hand, Commissioner Adams.
Yeah, since we're talking about PE, I wanted to ask Carl, because I don't recall, who am I supposed to turn in my sexual harassment training that I just did last week to?
Well, Carl isn't here, but
I'll answer for Carl.
I meant Steve.
It's all right. Big shoes to fill. You completed at your other job, right, Commissioner?
Yes.
Just send it to me.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I see another hand, Commissioner LeBron.
Yeah, my question is related to that too. And Steve, I do have my certificate of attending, but it's for this year and that stays for next year. But I just did it like a few weeks ago.
Yeah, that'll work because it's we work on a school year calendar.
Okay,
so
perfect.
That'll be fine. Just
All right.
provide it to me as well.
I'll send it to you now, actually, before I forget. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner LeBron, and thank you, Mr. Carling. I guess if there aren't any other questions, looking for hands. All right, so we'll have that calendar hopefully updated soon with all the other dates plugged in. We'll just keep working on that. And I guess that concludes our Governance Committee agenda this evening. Our next meeting is going to be January 5th, 2021. And with that, I hand the gavel back to President White. And I have to say, 7:12, I think it was like 40 minutes. So I don't know. What do you think, President White? We moved quickly. Is he not here? He's not even here.
No, I'm here. I don't know if I give you credit for that, because then I got to deal with Vice President Elliott.
Okay, all right.
And then Steve, he's always backing Vice President Elliott, so you got no shot there. So, but good job, thank you very much. And Commissioner Clark would do well to follow your example of running a clean and swift committee meeting. Commissioner Clark, the gavel is yours. The policy committee is online right now.
Thank you, President White, and I want to thank the board for allowing me to serve as the chairman of the policy committee, and thank you also, and welcome all of our viewers to the policy committee meeting. I did have a meeting last week, and I was informed by Rahima that I had some big shoes to fill, President White. But we had a great meeting, and as you know, the role of the policy committee is to review the policy manual of the Rochester City School District and to make sure our policies are current and up to date and in compliance with federal, state, and local statutes. So we had a great meeting, and we came up with some a very aggressive schedule so that we can begin to review the 216 policies that are in the policy manual of the Rochester City School District. And with that, I'm assuming Rahima is going to go through the presentation tonight. So I'll turn it over to her so we can begin the presentation.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Commissioner Clark. Before we get started, we did want to just acknowledge that the changes in personnel for the policy committee that recently occurred. So as President White had mentioned previously, and as President Clark introduced himself this evening, he is now the chair of the policy committee. We are joined also on policy committee by parent rep Joe DiFiore, who I believe is still here in the room with us. And hi, Joe. And with the departure of Carl Christoph, Steve Carling has now stepped in as the administrative liaison to the policy committee. So we just wanted to announce those changes. So I will go ahead and share for the presentation. So as Commissioner Clark just mentioned, we are undergoing on the policy committee the policy manual update. As everyone knows, the policy manual is in need of an update and has been. The board is directed to set the strategic direction of the district through policy development and adoption. And so to that point, we have looked at a couple of update options. And so prior to my joining the board, Kalia Wade, the district clerk, went ahead and reached out to several of our area districts, specifically Buffalo and Syracuse, to talk with them about how they went about their policy update. That process they did decide to do internally. So we looked at that as well as the utilization of NYSBA's policy update service. Due to the financial conditions in the district, it was felt that the utilization of NYSBA's policy update service was not going to be the best use of our funding. And so we have opted to move forward with an internal process. So through that conversation with Buffalo and Syracuse, Kalia learned that their process took about 3 to 4 years. And so with that, we are, even with a more aggressive time frame and schedule, we are looking at the potential of a 3-year time frame. So let's talk a little bit about the process, which in the previous policy committee meeting of the whole, we did kind of briefly talk about this. And so what the proposal is to move the policy manual update into a subcommittee, similar to the one that we're utilizing for the code of conduct. That subcommittee would consist of 2 to 3 commissioners, general counsel, any appropriate administrative personnel, the policy committee parent rep, and appropriate board staff. In relation to the 2 to 3 commissioners, we would have Commissioner Clark as the policy chair. There is a proposal that, so there's 2 different proposals. One, that there are 2 to 3 standing commissioners who participate in the subcommittee. The alternate proposal is that in addition to Commissioner Clark is the standing member, that we would rotate out the other 2 to 3 commissioners so that they would be related to the subject matter. So if we're discussing finance, it would be Commissioner LeBron, or academics, it would be Vice President Elliott, and so forth. This subcommittee would meet bi-weekly starting in January, and we will be posting the approximate policy review schedule to the website so that the community, students and families could follow along and know what policies would be discussed at what time. The subcommittee would then provide monthly updates in the policy committee of the whole meetings, and we will be reviewing policies in blocks by topic, but, we'll review policies by topic in blocks of 8 to 10. So speaking of the timeline, one of the things that we looked at when we just accepted the state monitor's report was that there were a number of policy updates or policy creations that were required in the shalls. And so this here is a short chart to just kind of bring to everyone's attention the policies that are a part of the state monitor's report. These policies would not be reviewed through the subcommittee. It is being proposed that these policies would be reviewed in the committee of the whole, just to expedite them and keep up with the timeline that the state monitor had put forth in the plans. So as we look at the roadmap to how the policies will actually be reviewed, what the proposal is that the subcommittee would conduct an initial policy review, again, by blocks of 8 to 10. After they come away with their initial feedback and suggestions, they would then pass that policy to district administration, where the superintendent and executive cabinet would have up to 45 days to review and submit feedback to the subcommittee. At the same time, we've had some conversation regarding community engagement around the policy development, and felt strongly that it was necessary that we engage community. And so to that point, we will be looking at the same time the district administration is reviewing the policy, that appropriate parent groups and student groups would have policy blocks that pertain to their purview, and they would review and be able to provide feedback. So within that same 45-day timeframe, they would review and provide feedback, which would come to the subcommittee. The subcommittee would reconvene to review and consider all feedback, and then they would make the final decision about what the final policy would look like, which would then be forwarded, the policy block would be forwarded to the committee of the whole. And from there, they would move it out into the business meeting for potential adoption. To the point of engagement, we looked at the best way to engage students, because understanding that there's busy schedules during the day and class times may not allow for them to participate in all subcommittees. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to pause. Commissioner LeBron, I see your hand is raised. Did you want to ask your question now?
Yeah, I do. Before you get too far, I'm also writing questions, but can you go back to the previous slide for the roadmap? So with the community input piece, because it's a subcommittee, I guess I have 2 questions off of that. Are the subcommittees going to be live streamed or available? Because I know in the past, when I first came on the board, there were these like the committees, they weren't committees of the whole. So like finance as a committee would meet with 3 board members, and then it was technically open to the public, but oftentimes a lot of people from the public didn't engage. Either they didn't know or they just were not engaged in that process. So because we're now committee of the whole, I do feel that the community does get the opportunity to at least see these conversations, because all of these conversations that you see on Tuesday were happening anyway. They just weren't happening, you know, because we weren't live streaming them, people didn't know that they were happening all the time. So is the subcommittee going to be live streamed? And then in terms of community input, I know you mentioned parents and students, and absolutely, but I'm also interested in figuring out a way that staff has some input on this without any feeling that there's going to be any retaliation towards them. And I know that that is a real fear that people in our district do have, that they have to walk on eggshells if they're a staff member and give input. But when we're talking about policies that are going to be directly related to the individuals that have to like implement them and work them, I do think it's important to collect their feedback and have an avenue for them to have that feedback freely and honestly an open process. So have those things been considered as well?
Yes, so in terms of live streaming the subcommittees, that has not yet been discussed. And so I would leave that to a discussion with Commissioner Clark and potentially the policy, like kind of the subcommittee during preview meetings. And I'll divert to Commissioner Clark to talk about how he may want to get input from other board members or administration in relation to that. Commissioner Clark.
Yes, sorry about that. I was muted. I know we talked about inviting certain community members to our meetings and that they would only be in a role of listening and clarification, those that have expressed interest in certain policies. I don't have a problem with the live streaming, but at the end of the day, if we're in discussion, is that going to be a distraction? Since we're giving the community 45 days to give input into the recommendations that we're making. Because I think it would be better to come up with the recommendations and then give it to the community and have them come back to us so we could reconsider.
So just for clarification, the 45 days is only listed under district administration. I did hear Rahima mention that this will be put on the website for the community to have access to it, to review it. So it's going to be on our website for 45 days, or is there a time frame for the community to give input? And again, I think it would tie in if that's the process so that staff is allowed to also give input. I just constantly am thinking about how we do change policies around here without staff directly giving input. And then they're left to actually implement this, and they're responsible and held accountable at the school level for things that they didn't even give input. And had they given input, we may have discovered that some of our policies are not a good fit because they just there are other factors at play that impact those policies. And I would like us to figure out a way to avoid that and have a more an opportunity for more input from those who actually have to implement this and do the work.
I agree, and we will definitely take that under consideration because you're absolutely correct in the fact that we want the people that are responsible for the implementation of the policies to feel comfortable with those policies under the, as long as the policies stay in compliance with our, federal, state, and local statutes.
Okay.
And if I could just jump in to add, we're going to talk a little bit more in the next 2 slides about how parents and students and community will be able to provide input and what that process would look like a little bit. And then the hopes that we would maybe have district administration chime in somewhat about the potential plan to get department or staff level input. And that's not something that we've had direct conversation about just yet at this point in the process. So I just do want to acknowledge that would be something that we need to talk a little bit more about. So just to, Commissioner Clark, I saw you were going to say something. Okay. So to the point of engagement, so students will be engaged specifically through SLC where they're already meeting. They will be forwarded appropriate policy blocks that they're impacted by, and they would be able to review and provide that feedback to the subcommittee, similar to the district administration will be able to do. SLC would be able to send, SLC representative may attend the subcommittee meeting relating to any policies that they've provided feedback. And that was what Commissioner Clark was referencing, so that they could hear deliberations and or provide clarity around any questions that the subcommittee may have about their input. Understanding the decision making is going to rest with the subcommittee. And so parents and caregivers would have the same opportunity. And so they would be engaged through their already existing parent groups and parent reps, such as Mr. DiFiore, who is with us. So specifically our parent groups that exist already is PAC, BEC, and CPAC. So they would be forwarded appropriate, policy blocks, again, to review, similar to SLC and to district administration. And then they too would be able to come to the subcommittees that they've provided feedback on to hear those deliberations and provide clarity to the committee should they have any questions. Regarding the larger committee, we will hold public hearings as required. Community members, as always, can sign up to speak to the board, submit written comments, and we would highly suggest and encourage the community members provide feedback to the board's email address or by contacting us at the board office. And then again, to your question, Commissioner LeBron, the community members can view policy update materials via the district website. And so the calendar that we're referring to that will be posted is so that everyone is aware of what policies are being reviewed and what blocks at what time, so that they can sign up to speak or provide appropriate feedback through any of those avenues that we have. Are there any questions? First, Commissioner LeBron, did that answer your question?
Yes, and so I support the proposal that you guys have here, and I do like the idea of rotating the board members to the subject matter or the chairs of topics that they may be related to. And I guess for me, I would just throw this out there. If we go through with this plan, I do think that we should let the community know that they can contact the board members that are serving on the subcommittee or our policy chair directly with any feedback that they may have. I don't want people to feel like they can't reach out. They should reach out to us if there's no other opportunity for them to engage during the actual process. So if they have questions or ideas, to feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's very doable. We'll make sure that happens.
Could I just add something, Rahima, because you, Commissioner LeBron did ask about how do we get more staff involvement. If you just look at the 5,000 series, which has a focus on students, right? So take the extracurricular and co-curricular policy, or take the attendance policy. This is where, when it comes to cabinet, the respective cabinet member who has oversight for that particular area would take that particular area and go back. So attendance, for example, falls under Deputy Superintendent Martinez Davis. She would go back and work with Betsy, who did a presentation just a few board meetings ago, to solicit some feedback from her and her staff. We probably would want to also hear from a few principals, right? So filter it through the chiefs of schools. How does attendance play out at the elementary level and at the secondary level? So principals, APs. So you really filter and get feedback from the individuals who are responsible for implementation. Many of these we are not directly implementing. The board is not. Some of these I do, but not many. But you have many other individuals who are responsible for carrying this out, either the policy and or the regulation. So you take it from the cabinet level and then you work with the appropriate folks around. I did a process very similar to this. I was pleased to actually see this when I was in Brockport, and it really cast the net wide to get more involvement on the staff side. It was very open, very collaborative, and it worked very well. And we were actually able to go through all of our policies. Some of the policies, unfortunately, were over 20 years, hadn't been looked at, and we were able to rotate through the policies in about 2.5 years. It was a solid process. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Powell, I did see your hand go down and then back up. I just not sure if you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was debating whether this was the absolutely best forum for it. It's tangential, but we'll try it. The discussion about the student representative and accessing SLC for their input. I'm reminded that the SLC charter, if you will, that I described at the beginning of this meeting was dated 1997, and I'm not sure it's ever been even seen since then. So I have a special request that if it's possible to move through the archives. I don't know if legal counsel's office ever got a copy of it. Maybe not. I can tell you that Barbara Jarznicki and was the point person, and the communications office had served the role as kind of the what do you call it when a teacher is the head of a club, kind of like what Anthony Jordan does today. That role used to be performed by someone from the communications office for some reason. So I wonder if a copy of the charter could be found somewhere in the archives of the communications office. And same with the, I don't know where we're going to find charters for all of our various board established groups like Bilingual Council and Parent Advisory Council. But I think that those charters need to be in some way attached to our policy manual, whether it be as an exhibit or some other designation. But the fact that we can't easily lay our hands on a charter document, it strikes me as kind of a failing in our whole policy process.
Willa, the only thing I'm going to say, you went all the way back to Barbara Jarznicki. Oh my goodness, that's a person from way back in the day.
I'm telling you,
oh wow!
I was there. Brett Bruin was the student representative. He was a student at School Without Walls, and he essentially reimagined this district-wide student council as a student leadership congress, and he really reached out to students in other schools with the idea of being something like a model UN.
Wow.
But I don't know if I've ever seen the charter, and we've recently had conversations about the Parent Advisory Council and their bylaws or their charter and the conflicts around that. And the fact is, I'd have to go through ancient emails to find copies of both the original and the proposed amended charters. They should be much more available than that. They should be perhaps exhibits within our policy manual.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. Commissioner LeBron?
Yes, I just wanted to actually respond directly to what Dr. Myers had just mentioned with the process. I think with all due respect, like, I want to be honest that in our district, there is still a culture of fear, and from our staff to speak out on certain issues. And although we do get some staff that will come to these board meetings and speak openly and bravely, I do know that is not the case for many other staff members who don't feel comfortable doing that. And I just want to make sure that we have an opportunity that right now, when we're talking about changing policies, to get their input and their voices. And I'll share that, when I worked in the district, there were a number of decisions that were being made and changes. And oftentimes, as a staff member, I wasn't paying attention to what was happening at these board meetings and what discussions were being had about policy changes. I would walk in and be like, our principal would say, hey, this got changed from central office, and this is how we have to start doing the work. And sometimes it was in the middle of the school year. And I often felt like we were constantly changing directions. But what was really frustrating was also the fact that there were no supports put in place when we were asked to make these changes. So when we start talking about policies, and I'm all for changing a lot of our policies anyway, let me just put that out there. I just want to make sure that, again, as we're changing policies, that they make sense to the actual direct staff that have to, implement this, whether they're in food services or they're, a TA or a rep member who's like in the classroom assisting the teacher, and obviously our teachers as well, and then our support staff in the main offices. I just want to make sure that all those individuals who are at the school and building level have an opportunity to give some input and completely respect their principles. And I know that, again, having experience working in the district, some principals are amazing and others need a lot of support and how they, their leadership skills, I'll put it like that. And that's just based on real life lived experience myself working in this district and in different schools and capacities. So I just want to put that out there. And again, I want to encourage the staff to reach out to board members. They certainly can reach out to myself anonymously as well if they want to give feedback anonymously. But I still want us as a board and as an administration and as a body to figure out a way to allow them to give input on some of these changes that are being discussed or proposed. Thank you.
And I think we can accomplish a part of that by, letting staff know that we welcome any ideas and suggestions. And how we do that, I'm sure the administration we'll work together and we'll make sure that they understand this is not a hostile environment, but we want to hear their suggestions and input in the process.
Thank you, Commissioner Clark. Are there any other questions or comments? No? Okay, so with that, I am, correction, District Clerk, Ms. Kalia Wade just let me know that there needs to be a motion to accept the process, correct? Kalia, can you come on and thank you.
Sure. Just trying to figure out, and this is really a question for Mr. Carling, if we do need a motion to move forward with this process, considering that this is the process that is going to kind of dictate how the board reviews a majority of its policies for the next 3 years or so. Is that necessary via motion, or is it just kind of accepted as is?
I'll defer to President White. Do we need a oh, I'm sorry, you've already deferred to our legal counsel.
Steve, are you there with us?
Perhaps it would be easy if I just made a motion and we could proceed from there.
Yeah, I don't think it could hurt to create a record of the board's decision in this regard. So I imagine that's what Steve would say. Certainly cannot hurt.
So moved.
We have a second?
Second.
Great. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All right, the motion passed. Thank you. Turn it back over to you, President White.
All right. Rahima, there was no update on the New York State Bar, New York State School Board Association. No, that's all right.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep, so I was actually gonna ask Mr. Carling to come on and just share any updates from NYSBA and a follow-up to last meeting's update.
Hey, the only thing that Carl had flagged on his way out the door that we even looked at was the update to the record retention policy. And the policy we have right now as it exists actually incorporates the changes. What happened was they shifted to a new schedule. It's a 100 and something plus page document that talks about all the things we have to retain and for how long. And but the current schedule, the current policy we have actually incorporates the section of the law that was changed, which makes it a kind of living document, if you will. So we don't have to update the policy every time the government changes which schedule they want to use. So that that did not need to be updated. Other than that, I have been presented with the documents that are coming in from NYSBA, and I'll figure out if we have to prioritize anything for the next meeting. That's on the list of things to do.
Okay.
Thank you, Steve.
Yep.
All right. So thank you, Commissioner Clark, for leading us through that discussion, and thank you, Rahima, for all your good work. Commissioner Clark, I don't know if you realize this, Rahima is not much newer than you are, and she has done a great job, as you have witnessed, in getting us up to speed and getting us moving forward. So on behalf of the full board, I know you've already thanked her, Commissioner Clark, but on behalf of the full board, thank you, Rahima, for this good work that you're doing. Everybody always tells us that our number one job is policy. We're policymakers. And Rahima, you have gotten us further down the road in that task than we've been in a while. So we appreciate that. And Commissioner Clark, again, thank you for your willingness to chair this committee and getting your meeting off to such a great, your chairmanship off to such a great start. So thank you. All right, that pretty much concludes our meeting, except that we have to go into executive session. As I've said to you all in the past, sometimes we, for those watching, sometimes we have to have private conversations with our attorney. Sometimes we have to have conversations about personnel matters, which by law are confidential. And so I need a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing a particular employee, the terms and conditions of a particular employee. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Adams. Is there a second?
Seconded.
It has been moved and seconded that we go into executive session to discuss the terms and conditions of a particular employee. And that means we will have that conversation in private as the law requires. We will, in all likelihood, come back out of executive session if for no other reason to do our survey. Although it's doubtful that we'll have anything to vote on, but for those of you who are gladiators, people who really like to watch the board meetings from begin to end, after executive session, we'll come back out and conclude our evening. If not, on behalf of the Board of Education, please be safe and have a hope-filled evening. All right. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. Again, good night to everyone who won't be staying tuned in for the remainder of our meeting. 3. Good evening, everybody. As I indicated, we're back in open session. We only have one order of business, and that is to conduct our survey. As many of you know, we want to try to monitor ourselves and try to figure out how we can, the buzzword now is continuous improvement. One of the ways that we do that is by looking at ourselves at the end of every meeting and seeing how we did. Madam Clerk, can people see these surveys or no?
No, it pops up in Zoom. So unless we share the screen, I don't believe so.
So as my colleagues begin to fill this out, that survey results, I assume that that is public record information, right?
Yes, it is. And the survey results are available on board docs currently.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. So Commissioner Malloy, that she discussed those survey results earlier today. Those results are available on board docs. So folks want to know how we're doing and how we think we're doing, and the questions that you saw that we may change, you can go on board docs and check that out. Okay, how are we doing on completions? Commissioner Adams, were you going to say something, or is that an old hand?
Still
That's an
waiting.
old hand.
Old hand. Are we set or no?
1 second. I have 6. We have 6 board members. Are any of the, Dr. Myers-Small, are you completing, or Dr. Jallo?
I did.
Okay, that means I'm still waiting on, oh, we lost some people actually. So yes, we are completed.
Okay, sounds good. All right, I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Boy. Thank you, Commissioner Adams. All those in favor of adjourning indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Hi, good night, everyone. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks a lot. Good meeting.